So, you finally found the perfect home you've been looking for, put in an offer, and yes, it got accepted. But now you are just waiting and waiting and waiting. Why does it take so long to actually get the keys? Was it not supposed to be as easy as signing some papers and moving into a new home? Well, there is a lot happening behind the scenes that you do not realize. From inspections to bond approvals to legal paperwork, it's a whole process. And today we're going to break it all down step by step in such a way that you understand exactly what to expect after your offer has been accepted. And if you are new to this channel, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. It is for free, it's not going to cost you anything. And I promise you, you will be receiving a lot of educational content around the world of real estate within South Africa.
Bond originator. Basically, you mean as a buyer, I shouldn't go to the bank myself to ask for the bond, but I should use someone else who will do it for me. Now you have these kind of buyers that are private bankers. So they usually feel like, because I'm a private banker, like I trust my bank, they'll give me a better deal and stuff like that. If you are a private banker, you still need to use a bank the process of now owning your house. Let's say you have been looking with an agent, you found an agent, you started looking for the house, you find the house that you like, and you are prepared to like actually put an offer in it. Then you put an offer, the offer is accepted, and you start the process now. Okay, so what are things that you have to expect, or things that are expected for you to do from the time the offer has been accepted to the day now you are moving in?
All right. So it's an interesting process because it follows a very specific sequence. And often people are really overwhelmed by the process, but we trust in the fact that the attorneys know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now take us through the process. So the minute you find the property, you put the offer in, sellers accepted the offer, you're at that point. So the next step, we're just assuming that it's a property you're buying with a bond.
Yes, a bond.
Just for sort of ease of reference. So you then, offers accepted, then you actually send your sale agreement, the signed sale agreement, which is now legally binding. It's accepted by both parties. You're then under obligation to then go and apply for the bond. We do encourage our clients to actually use a bond originator because they are the best suited to actually help to negotiate the best interest rate on the client's behalf.
Can I please step you on that one? When you were speaking about the bond originator, basically you mean as a buyer, I shouldn't go to the bank myself to ask for the bond, but I should use someone else who will do it for me. Now you have these kind of buyers that are private bankers. So they usually feel like, because I'm a private banker, like I trust my bank, they'll give me a better deal and stuff like that. If you are a private banker, you still need to use a bond originator.
Okay, so that's when you have that serious conversation with your client, and there is that assumption that your private banker is going to give you the best deal. It doesn't always happen like that. Private bankers have got a skill set and they've got certain expertise. They'll rely on someone else in the organization to actually do the bond application. So they're not really the ones going to be doing the application. So we need to get skilled people to actually do that application. So I always, and in fact, some of the bond originators got wonderful statistics to show where a client went to their private banker, what interest rate, the best interest rate they could get from the private banker, as opposed to using a bond originator. And the bond originator, 9 times out of 10, will get you a better interest rate. And the reason why they can is because they can actually then chat to the various banks that are offering, putting through a quote or a bond grant or an ARP, and say, that's your interest rate. I could possibly get it lower at another bank. Do you want to improve yours? So they've got the ability to actually negotiate on your behalf. Banks have got an appetite to lend. And so it's important that we have got someone negotiating on our behalf. Clients often want to avoid using a bond originator because they think they have to pay them. They
Yeah.
don't pay them. The bank will pay them once the bond's been approved. So going to bond originator is probably the best decision for clients to actually, in terms of trying to get their finance. When we have a bond originator, they interface with their liaisons in the bank. Whereas if I walk straight into my bank, I'm on a helpline and I'm waiting for someone to answer my call. This is my application number and what's happening, whatever. You don't get the feedback that you would get if you're using a bond originator. So I say to my bond originator, here's my client, here's the offer to purchase. Can you please approach all the banks and see which bond, which is the best interest rate for them, and then negotiate on their behalf. So hands down, going with the bond originator is definitely you've got control and you get feedback, and you're going to get a better interest rate.
100%.
So what the bond originator does, so you've signed your agreement, you've now you sent to the bond originator. The bond originator then engages with the buyer to say, I need these documents, salary slips, I need your bank statements, I need this, I need that, I need a settlement letter from your one particular account to show that it's paid up. And they will look at the application and make suggestions to say, you've got this little personal loan. If you could reduce it, or it will make your application stronger. And they give really good advice about how to make the application stronger. If you are insistent on using a private banker, all I ask my client, I say, can you have a conversation with the bond originator? And by the time they've had that conversation, they're converted and they'll go with the bond origination.
With that, I remember I had a client that was a private banker as well. And when I suggested that, okay, you know what, let's use a bond originator because of A, B, and C. Of course, they were like, okay, but don't worry about it because I'm a private banker, so my bank will actually do the things for me. I was like, okay, let's do that, because I was like, okay, no, it's your call. So what I suggested was that go to your bank and of course apply, but then at the same time also speak to the bond originator. Then we can tell the bond originator that they shouldn't approach your bank because you've already done that. And you know what happened? Their bank offered them a huge amount. That's okay. No, in pre-approval, we can give you this much. I was like, okay, happy. Then that's amazing. And then once we had signed the offer, then they were supposed to give that. It was half that amount that they promised.
Absolutely.
But when they were supposed to now do it, they couldn't. They were like, no, we can't do that. We'll give you like less. And we couldn't. And at the same time, luckily, the bond originator was already like negotiating on her behalf to other banks. And the other banks, one of the other banks, they were like, no, we can give it to you. And I was like, okay, no, bond originator is the way.
Very good example. It's really great to do that, because then you know that you're in the right place and you're dealing with the right people. So what the bond originator does is they'll then help the client with the application, just to sign and fill in the expenses and the assets and liabilities, get all their documentation, submit it to all the banks simultaneously, and then they work it in terms of that one bank might come back with an AIP, which is an approval in principle, to say we have an appetite to actually offer you a particular bond or grant for this amount of money.
Yes.
And then the bank send a valuer to the property to make sure that the price that they're paying for the property is consistent with the value of the property. And I always say to my clients, you think you're paying too much for the property, an independent person, not an estate agent or not the seller, an independent valuer for the bank will make sure that there is enough value to warrant the bond that you're applying for. The valuer comes back, and then we get the final grants. And at that stage, that's where the bond originators start working, and they start saying, come to this bank, why don't you actually get us a better interest rate for this one and whatever. And eventually they get the best possible bond grant for the client at the best interest rate. They explain things to the clients about access facilities. They're obviously going to have a flexible interest rate, but they could have an access facility in terms of if they are paying a deposit, they might be able to access some of that money later on during the term if they have an emergency. And then the bond's granted and everyone's excited. We tell the seller, your property is now sold. We tell the purchaser, we're now going to move to the next stage. And the next stage there is where we instruct the attorneys to start working on the transfer process for the property. So we do the bond attorneys and we do the transferring attorneys, and they will then link up with the seller's cancellation attorneys. So then the attorneys work really hard to start drawing up all the documents for the transfer. And we keep in touch with attorneys because we also, the clients want feedback from us, and we can also give them honest feedback about where we are in the process. So a couple of things have to happen. So the most important thing is the seller comes onto the stage, and the seller then has to send through a photograph of the water and electricity meters and sign an affidavit so that the attorneys can apply to the municipality for a rates clearance certificate.
Oh, yeah.
So we need the rates clearance certificate, we need the levy clearance certificate for a sectional title. The seller then also tells the agent, please use this particular electrician and this particular entomologist to do my COCs for the electrical and for the pest. We might need to have a gas certificate if there's a gas stove. We might need to have an electric fence certificate as well. Depends on the property.
Yeah.
So the seller does that for us. We then get those quotes, and any remedial work will be for the seller to pay. And those certificates then go into the attorney's file. They collect everything so that they then get to a stage where they will be ready to lodge. But before lodgement, other things happen. It's a bit of a long process. Are you with me? So they've got all these certificates, they've got the clearance certificates. With the rates, it does take quite a long time. So the first thing the municipality do is they send through the rates figures to say, this is the amount you need to pay to actually get your clearance certificate receipt. And the sellers then pay that amount, or they take it out of the proceeds so that we can actually get the receipt. Once we've got that, then we can actually start looking at getting the property registered. Interesting thing that also happens is on our sale agreements, and it's in every sale agreement, there's a thing called a guarantee. So what happens is you've basically got your deadline for your bond grant. You've got 21 days or 30 days to get your bond grant. Once the bond is granted, the bond attorneys are instructed by the bank to say, please get ready. You need to actually get your bond documents ready for the purchaser to sign.
Yes.
The guarantee is like an academic process that happens, and very few people understand it, in the sense that the transferring attorneys collect up all the FICA and everything from buyers and sellers. They then do a draft document, title deed. They've got to send that draft document through to the bond attorneys to have a look at, to see that everything's correct in terms of property description, that it all marries up with the purchasers' names, the earth numbers. Only when the bond attorneys get that draft document can they send a guarantee back to the transferring attorneys to say, we're happy with everything. So those guarantees, it happens in the background, but it's important to understand that the minute your bond's granted, that's not a guarantee. They've got to have sight of the draft document from the transferring attorneys. And that's the guarantee that comes back. All right. So some people find that confusing, very confusing. But I always go through that with my clients as well as with my agents, just to explain that particular process. And then at that stage, comes back, the guarantees are in, and then the attorneys then do the final documents for signatures by the buyers and the sellers. They sign those documents. So then their checklist should almost be full. They should have all the compliances, the rates clearance certificates. They should have the guarantees in place. They should have indication from the bond attorneys to proceed to lodge. You may now lodge. The cancellation attorneys have to be on board to say we're ready. So we have now submitted our cancellation figures and we're ready to actually move forward to lodgement. Interesting thing in terms of cancellation attorneys is that if you're the seller and you've got a bond on your property, you might have an access facilities. You might want to take some money out of there to use for the next venture you're on. Yes, so sometimes people, for example, even if you're not selling your home, you might have an access facility and you decide, I need to pay school fees, and you could access your bond, and then they give you money out of the bond to actually pay for an emergency or whatever the case might be. Sellers sometimes want to access their bond to use that money for a deposit on the next property they buy.
Oh, yes,
Okay?
yes.
It is very important for sellers to realize the minute the cancellation attorneys have called for final figures on the seller's bond, the account is frozen and they can't access.
Oh, so at that time they can't access it.
Absolutely. So I say to clients, if you need to access that, access it now. We tell the bond attorneys, can you please actually only do the cancellation, call for the cancellation figures in a week's time. They withdraw what they need for incidentals, and the minute they call for those cancellation figures, that bond is frozen.
Oh, okay. So I have two questions on that one. The first one is that when you access your bond, for whatever reason, what does it affect? Does it affect your interest rates? Does it affect your the repayments or the duration of like the bond? What does it affect?
So it won't affect the term. It won't affect how long your bond is running for. It won't affect the 20 years or however many years. It won't affect the term. It will affect your repayment because you're taking a withdrawal. Withdrawal out of there will affect your repayments. In terms of interest rate, it depends on the individual. They might have to reassess the interest rate. So that will depend very much on the individual.
It all depends on the bank.
Yeah. And I often have clients who say, look, we haven't got money to buy the house cash, so we're going to get 100% bond. But in a year's time, we are getting this big payout from wherever, and we'd like to actually put it into our bond. And we say that's absolutely fine. When they get the big payout, they can then deposit that money into their bond. They can either do one of two things. They can either keep the bond repayments at the same rate, means that they'll pay it off quicker, or they can phone the bank to say, can you please adjust my repayment amount, because now I've put some money in. I no longer owe $1 million, I now owe only 500, and then they can readjust your repayment amount. But you have to phone and tell the bank that.
Oh, so you have to. Okay, so for example, let's say that I'm buying a property for, let's say, 650, and then maybe 2 or 1 year down the line, I want to put there like 150. So I can speak to the bank to take down my repayments every year, because now. Oh, okay, that's
you can adjust it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's good, especially for investment purposes, because once you have money, you can always take it down so that
it will help with the interest. You're not going to pay as much.
Yeah. Also, you're pushing for what do you call this? A positive cash flow.
That's right, positive cash flow.
Yeah,
absolutely. And also, when a person decides to sell their house, it's very important that they actually give the bank notice. So when one takes a listing on the house and there's a bond on the property, we say to the sellers, please contact your bank. Different banks have different formats. They might need an email, they might need a phone call, they might do it on the app, depends on the bank. You have to actually warn the bank of your intention to possibly cancel the sale, because you've got a fixed term, you've got 20 years. Now you want to pay it off quicker if you sell the house. So you send through the notification to say, I've put my property on the market, so please be aware that I might be cancelling my bond if I get a sale on my property. The bank, basically, most banks, some of the banks don't have it. It just depends on which bank. They require 3 months notice. So if you list your house today and you give notice and the sale goes through very quickly in 6 weeks' time, you'll be paying big penalties because you didn't give them advance warning of the fact that you are going to be cancelling. Invariably, once we take a sale agreement on a property, we have 3 months before we actually have to have transfer. It takes about 3 months for the transfer. So, but I always say to my clients, rather send through the notification and either redo it if we haven't sold within the first 3 months, rather than to avoid those penalties. That's important to do that.
Okay. Now I'm thinking that if you have a listing, they will put a notice for 3 months. But if the property can't sell for, let's say, 4 months, you have to do another notice again.
So depending on the bank, they might just say, just remind us that you're extending it.
Oh, right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And often you'll get a letter or notification.
Oh,
from
all
the
right,
bank.
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now in terms of the process, now the attorneys are all ready. We're going to
Okay.
lodge now.
All right.
Then after that, how long does it
Okay.
take?
So before the lodge, I really have got a funny story I've got to tell you. So I'm selling a property. It was in the sort of Camperdown area, so there's a lot of open fields and things. So it's actually really lovely. There's some beautiful homes there. Sold a property there. The clients were so happy. They were just delighted with their new home. And about 6 months later, I get a phone call, and there's a problem. And I said, "What's the problem?" No. They need to actually know the name of the entomologist who gave the pest certificate when they bought the house. Now, this is 6 months down the line.
Yeah.
So I said, "No problem. This is the name of the entomologist." However, the entomologists actually only check for the little sugar ants that would be possibly wood borer and so forth. Okay, so they don't check for other things. They just check for ants and wood borer because they want to make sure that the property is sound and that it's actually not going to have a problem with ants eating away at the wood.
Oh,
for example.
yes.
So I said, "Well, have you got an ant infestation?" Because that certificate doesn't last forever. At the time, they cleared the property. There weren't any ants, and they gave us a certificate. Very reputable company. The lady said, "No, it's not ants." I said, "Well, what is the problem?" She said, "I've got a python in my gutter." So I said, "That's not covered by the So pythons are not covered." That was a first for me.